Happy 5 years everybody, and welcome to a special LEGO Legend of Zelda custom set video. For today marks the anniversary of 5 years ago when I began working on wave 1 of the custom set showcase, and to mark that honestly pretty insane milestone, here is Z00100, the 100th custom set. And yes, I know you haven't seen all 100 yet, this is the 100th I've designed, and this is the Hyrule Castle's Collector's Edition. This model is different from any playscale castle that we've done so far, and it's a standalone piece with the exterior of the Ocarina Castle but with an interior twist, as it pays homage to the entire mainline series. That's references from Zelda 1 all the way up to Echoes of Wisdom, a bit like what the big Disney castle does. So let's open up that box, take a peep, and show everything it has to offer. One quick note first though, 5 years is a long time, and so to celebrate, just like we did last year when the Deco Tree came out, I'm opening the floor to all of you to submit your LEGO Zelda builds, art, or honestly anything else to octane.thermoplastic@gmail.com for a guaranteed feature in a community video. Now, this isn't a competition and there are no rules, as long as it's something you made and it relates to LEGO Zelda. Send it across and I'll share it in our 5 year celebration in just over a month's time. The deadline to submit is the 6th of April, and no, it does not have to pay homage to the CSS. Literally anything and everything LEGO Zelda is welcome. Although, if you have been inspired by the work that we've done here on the channel, or if I've managed to entertain you over the last few years, then do share your experience with octane thermoplastic below, and those, hopefully nice, maybe not, those messages will also make it into the video as well. Right, sorry, castle time now. So back to it, as we mentioned, this set is for ages 18 up with 2,394 pieces, would retail for £259.99 Great British Pounds. Of course, that will be different in euros and dollars, and contains 17 figures and 4 brick-built characters, and that number is slightly debatable, but we'll take a look at them as we go through the model. Let's quickly read the description and then get straight into it. Relive memories from across the LEGO Zelda franchise with the all-new LEGO Legend of Zelda Hyrule Castle Collector's Edition. Build the silhouette of the first 3D iteration of this storied location and follow Link's journey to meet the princess by sneaking through the palace gardens. But this castle offers more than just a tribute to Ocarina of Time, as die-hard fans will be able to spot references abound to every game in the series. Fill out iconic scenes from Link to the Past all the way to Breath of the Wild with the included 17 minifigures, or add some action to the rooftops with included elements for minifigure posing, recreating another influential N64 stage. And that is of course in reference to the fact that the castle's rooftops are used in Smash Bros, and you can pose figures from probably across your LEGO collection across these different rooftops to recreate yourself battling on that iconic stage as mentioned. But without any further ado, let's open up the box and see what is inside. We have 38 numbered bags and 2 instruction manuals for this one, just splitting the build in half, although this is not a dual build, meaning that if you have 2 people, you're probably not going to be able to build it together. If we open up that first manual, we will indeed find that bags 1 to 8 continue the base. This is I wouldn't want to say boring, because there's still a couple of details, especially around the back on the interior, but you get 3 figures at this stage while you build up the foundations, that being Child Link from Ocarina of Time, a castle soldier from across the series, but mostly Ocarina of Time, and then the Great Fairy, referencing the fact that we do indeed have a Great Fairy fountain in this set. Then bags 9 through 12 start the actual castle structure, give us a young Zelda from Ocarina of Time, and then of course start what is her courtyard area on the left hand side, a smaller selection of bags there. Moving on to 13 to 18, we have a couple more figures here, that being Child Malon from Ocarina, the Postman from Majora's Mask and just generally across the series, Zelda's horse which he escapes on in Ocarina of Time, Kojiro the Cuckoo, the blue cuckoo specifically, Minish Link as a micro figure, the Hand in the Loo and Kaepora Gaebora, and this actually finishes a large proportion of the ground floor of the castle, excluding the exterior wall, so sort of does this right hand side, and these figures are all tied to the rooms that appear in this section. That ends the first manual and opens up the second one, where we see that bags 19 to 24 give us a Talon and a Link to the Past sprite Link, which of course has the pink hair as a bit of a reference, and these bags build out the front wall and tree sections, so just sort of create the castle courtyard and full fortifications, before you move on to bag 25 to 30, which actually build up the second floor of the castle in its entirety, and that includes a couple of different rooms on the inside, and this gives us 2 more figures, again relevant to the rooms inside, a second soldier in the set, and then the Poe Collector from Ocarina of Time. Interesting inclusion here. Bags 31 and 32, just 2 bags here, build up the throne room, which is the 3rd floor, as well as this small rooftop section, and give us the King and Agamemnon from Link to the Past. And then bags 33 and 34 do the tower off to the right, which is obviously there in game, but also represents Zelda's tower as well, and this gives us our adult Ocarina Zelda. And then 35 to 37, another 2 bags for the tallest tower and rooftops, which of course has a couple more interiors inside and gives us our Ocarina of Time Ganondorf and our Link Between Worlds Yuga as 2 more figures from this bag. Bag 38 does Calamity Ganon just to finish off the build, as well as a couple of side pieces, and gives us one figure, and that is the Triforce Wish Link, who we will come back to, and he is the special Z0100 figure that I chose to include here and is not realistic at all. But before we take a look at those, let's just start having a look at this model. As I mentioned, there's a huge amount of figures which really bring it to life and make it feel a lot more lived in, like we saw on the front of the box, and these all tie to the various scenes throughout the model. I'm almost sure I could have included more. There are so many figures that could interact here, but you have to put limits somewhere, and these are the ones I've chosen. A couple of them are reuses, obviously, to fit with the CSS's predictability of having to reuse figures where possible, and then there's a fair few new ones in here, specifically stuff like Aghanim and Yuga, I think, are standouts. As far as iconicity goes, obviously other exclusive ones that we'll talk about as we go through. And of course, this is the third style of Hyrule Castle that we've done in the showcase so far. Just recently we had the Echoes of Wisdom Hyrule Castle, which represented a more mid-scale play range one, and then on the left there you have the Hyrule Castle Sanctum from Breath of the Wild, which is part of our expandable Hyrule Castle system, where you can combine different expansions from the Breath of the Wild castle together. And of course, these are all different compared to the big castle series that I'm doing based off Breath of the Wild, which is in minifigure scale and totally not viable as a set because we're already at 70,000 parts. But that is a question for another day. Yeah, it's pretty huge, and here you can actually see the scale of that compared to that. This is close, it's a little bit perspective distorted, but yeah, that just shows you how the size difference between these two castles work. And then of course the Breath of the Wild one is not yet finished. One day. Of course, this set takes a lot of inspiration from Dollhouse sets, most specifically stuff like the Disney Castle from 2016 and 2023. This is, of course, because the model has an open back and plenty of references to a storied franchise on the inside. Of course, the Disney Castle paying tribute to all of those different animations and films throughout its history, and this one inspiring all these Zelda builds from across all the different castle iterations, and some builds that don't even appear in the castle, which, of course, you can see on the back here with all these different rooms. And although we only have sort of 3 floors of castle and some towers, I made use of the basement, and the reason this set is raised up the way it is to include a whole set of extra rooms on the bottom, which we will take a look at. I'm going to try and cover everything, but of course this is going to be a really long video because there's just so much to cover, especially when you look down from the top and just see the depth. And that was really one of the sort of scaling things here, is I really wanted to be able to follow through the Ocarina of Time path through the castle, and that is the path that we are going to be taking as we go through the model today. And of course, from the left and the right, most of these sides are blank because they have exterior scenes, but there are also some interior scenes on here as well, and more references and Easter eggs, which you might be starting to get an idea for, but we will take a look at them all up close. And just one last time, we did indeed mention that the rooftops are designed to look like the N64 stage from Smash, meaning you can take your Sonic, you can take your characters and pose them on these rooftops as if they are fighting with each other. And I tried my best, and that's why the roofs are green and not matching the colour seen in Ocarina of Time, because I'm trying to strike this tribute to every incarnation across the series rather than just one specific one, and that includes referencing Smash here. So that's why the exterior doesn't perfectly mirror the Ocarina one, and also the Ocarina one is really, really low pixel. So of course I'm going to have some stuff to play around with and just sort of make it my own in that regard, but I still think it's a recognisable silhouette at the same time. But let's get up close now and just point out a couple more of the details. Of course, as I mentioned on the top of the roofs, you've got jumper studs, which allow for extra figure posing when considering Smash layouts. You've got all these flags up here, some of which are printed and other which are using the traditional flag piece in dark red and gold, just representing the crest. Throughout the building experience, there's a couple of hidden Easter eggs. Specifically in the basement, you bury 3 Technic balls, which are supposed to represent the pearls from Wind Waker, and I guess also Echoes of Wisdom now. And in one of the towers, there is a golden poop piece. Of course, this is a hidden Korok seed, which just makes a lot of sense, and it is completely hidden and inaccessible once the build is complete. Starting the entrance, we have a nice green plate which takes you up a ramp, and again, of course, this is not realistic to how you enter the castle in the game, but it is a nice horse ramp that allows Zelda to escape through orders for characters to enter. And I chose to recreate the fence all the way along the front using these bar elements, and the reason for that was just to keep it lower. I didn't want it to be too obtrusive and block the view, but I still wanted that nice contrast colour and of course that realistic detail that keeps the castle safe from the ground outside. You could argue that instead of having this dark tan wall, I should have done some rock work or something here, but I don't know, I like the square nature of it, and this ramp section out the front is removable easily, so that if you really wanted a flush display you could have it, although I do warn you it would look ugly with that ramp there. We obviously have the moat here that we cross over, and then there's a couple of jumper studs in front of the doors next to some torches. These doors of course do open inwards specifically as if you're being let into the castle. However, you could also imagine them being completely reinforced and inaccessible as if like it's a strong portcullis gate, but in order to keep this at a normal scale we had to use minifigure bigger doors instead of a big grand entranceway, or else the original castle, the main castle on the inside would have to be so much bigger. On the walls we have a smattering of masonry brick texturing, but not too much in order to keep it fairly minimalistic, and we're using 1x1 tiles to represent sort of windows or openings, which I guess, yes, stick out, but I really like the added texture and the colour that sort of breaks up the door. Above the door we have this main archway here, which is sort of a triangular shape, and we've got our first sticker in the set, which is a 1x8 tile with a Triforce logo on it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. We're going to see a fair few of these. And then you'll notice off in the corner that we actually have some signage for Hudson Construction Co., one of the very few Tears of the Kingdom references. I thought it'd be a nice little advertisement to fit in this spot, and it's always easily removable if you prefer the exterior to be pure Ocarina of Time, which it largely is apart from a couple of things like this. So you could easily remove that in and out. But again, I wanted to pay homage to the whole series, so you're going to see a lot of stuff like that. If we continue around the exterior, of course, this water flows from a grate, but then flows to the right side of the building and brings us around to this tree section here. The wall turns into a big octagonal turret, which is using plenty of diagonal building techniques, largely inspired. It's a modified version of the Rivendell technique, I think I'd say. So it's taken inspiration there, but I've definitely changed it up and scaled it, making use of tiles to make it as flush as possible. And this is the same as we use on the big tower for Zelda Study, and of course representing the tower that is on the top in the Smash stage as well. You'll notice that the windows here are not arch crenellation slits. I chose to give them the lattice text because this is definitely a sort of peacetime castle, although there are still plenty of spaces to put figures to defend. And obviously the bank along the front ends here for protection, but of course just like in game you sort of swim down the river and then jump out on the other side, where you'll notice that we have a tree which has Cape Gabor in it. We'll come back to him in a second. And then there is a black tile here to represent the entrance to the grotto, because there is actually a grotto underneath this section, another benefit to having it raised up. But beyond that, the green path continues into stone around the corner where we'll find Talon, but of course not before the owl Cape Gabor stops you to talk about your quest. So speaking of, let's introduce him, the first of the brickbuilt characters and first of the 20 odd minifigures we're going to take a look at today. He is of course using the existing owl piece. I know a lot of people would have wanted him to be a custom mold, but we've got to limit that where possible, so he is printing on the already existing dark tan owl. And you know what, I think it looks close enough. He's a sort of halfway colour between reddish brown and dark tan, and I think dark tan sort of accentuates him better and just feels slightly more modern. He does have the face so that he in a sense could have his head upside down and it would look correct, but obviously it's not going to because you can't rotate the head on this model. Maybe that means there's room for a brick-built Cape Gabor in the future, but for this scale it works perfectly just to have him here in the traditional owl piece, and I'm pretty sure this would be really desirable too. And who would he be, of course, without our first figure in the set for him to meet, and that is of course Young Link. This is not a new figure to the custom set showcase, having appeared in plenty of sets such as the Temple of Time and all the way back in Wave 1 in Goma's Nest, and then also a couple of other sets as well. And he is of course here using mid-legs with printing and then a normal hat piece. I think nowadays we can pretty much all say that if this was a real product it would be using the same figure in the deco tree, but just for the consistency's sake within the custom set showcase I've chosen to keep my drawn ones, because in my universe where I've designed these all, the deco tree does not exist. So here we have our shoddily drawn version of Young Link with no accessories for this model and this set. But let's get back to the build now. I mentioned underneath the tree there was an entrance to a grotto. That tree uses the Animal Crossing base, by the way, and just underneath there's no way to access it, but there is indeed a little space for a gossip stone, recreating of course the many gossip stone grottos from across Hyrule in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. And this build, yeah, is very similar to the one that we saw in the official Deku Tree set, which I want you to not think about too much. And then also down here, before we head inside the castle, is another little interior secret, and that is a 8-bit recreation of the first 2D section in Link's Awakening, recreating the cave with Goombas. You can see the little green tile up there for Link, all the ladders represented with bar elements, and then the brown 1x1 tiles are indeed the Goombas. And this is that first section recreated, I don't want to say block perfectly, but it's at a micro scale. And this is something that was done in the NES set for Mario, recreating World 1-2. And I thought it'd be nice to do a Zelda version of that here, and it kind of fits in and pays tribute to those older 2D games as well. It was a nice use of space. I'm happy with it. Very pleased that it exists and was able to fit in here. Also, just above it, we've got the section where you find Talon sleeping here. We've got the crates, which you then push into the river, and they do indeed, or should indeed fit. At least you can take them apart so that, say, one of them fits in a sense, because they are joined together with 2x2 tiles. And of course this allows them to sort of slide in spot, and then you could pretend to crawl through the water vent. Unfortunately, the vent is 1, not hollow, and 2, not big enough to fit a figure, but that is fine. There is also a door here, making use of the new medieval door piece and the lock element to represent sort of just another entrance to the castle. Again, this doesn't feel very safe on a siegeway, but I believe believe it is a detail that is here in game, and you can just imagine it's got a really strong padlock, and that actually opens into what I've turned into the royal stables. Obviously there are no references from the interior of the Ocarina of Time castle, so all the rooms, as I said, are custom, and we will pay homage to across all the series. You'll also notice I've crammed Easter eggs absolutely everywhere. So inside these barrels is a reference to Chateau Romani reusing a bottle print from Clocktown with the Chateau print on it, and yeah, that's another one that's great here. And then just on the wall above the little water entrance, you've got a space where you could put a soldier, making this into a proper battlement and just another way and place for you to pose your figures. There's also a vent, which is really hard to see underneath where the water can flow to as well, making it a complete loop. But of course, there are some more characters to this scene here. We of course have Child Malon, who is going to give you the egg to go wake up her dad. She's using a 1x2 brick for her legs to make her slightly shorter and still use a dress layout. And she's got some fairly simple printing on her arms and on her torso, and then just a very simple child face, and then these hair here in dark brown to recreate her in a very simplistic way. You know, it gets the idea across. It's important she's here, at least from the story's perspective, alongside her dad, who she's here to wake up, who is Talon. This is the same figure that appeared in the Escape the Ranch set back in Wave 3. I've just updated him because that original figure was a bit yikes and a bit, it was in a bit bad spot. So he's just got some dual molded arms. He uses one of the newer skin tones, one of the medium nougat ones. He has some leg printing and then some printing to accentuate his belly as well, and then a big beard on his head, and he looks slightly concerned as if he's just woken up from a daze. And of course, while this one doesn't actually wake him up, I did think it was a fun inclusion and a nod to another side quest in Ocarina, specifically to here include Korijo the cuckoo, the blue cuckoo. So this is a recolor of an existing mold that we've designed for cuckoos that have appeared before, and I thought it'd be fun to have this exclusive one in here. It is the same cuckoo mold as you'd expect, and it just looks like the one that is in the Big Oran Sword Trade siding quest is where I believe that one shows up in Ocarina. So yeah, that's he's hanging out inside the stable, so we'll see him again later. Moving on though, of course I mentioned we have plenty of sort of walls and spaces to hold your soldiers around. Of course you can put them on the top of this corner wall turret. There was the little bit of wall above the dam entrance, which I just spoke about, but there's also this sort of 3 wide section here with these leaves, which is actually right by Zelda's bedroom and sits above, so maybe they could, this is how they defend the stable door or something, but it's another battlement for you to put soldiers on, as these ones aren't quite high up enough to, say, be useful for Smash Stage and whatever. Around the gardens, which we'll get to in just a second, there is also a walled perimeter, so you've got a 2 spud space here, so you could put guards on the walls there, and then as we move over to the far left, there's a couple of other sections of walls, but we'll come back to those in more detail in a minute. Speaking of the garden, then, this is the other big exterior section and tries to mimic, of course, the sneak sequence from Ocarina of Time with a couple of added details. The wall where you come in from the vent is actually solid and just features this planting bed because you never actually see the path you come through here. And then there are these small hedge maze builds, which are just using some modified bricks with some rounded tiles on them to recreate a vague hedge look, and the idea being you could sneak around them and pass through. We have got a mailbox in here, which of course is not realistic to the game, but does reference, of course, the various games in which these mailboxes are key, such as Wind Waker and the other Hero of the Sea games, and that is why the postman is included. Oh, of course, Majora's Mask as well, and it has the Rito Mail symbol on it here, same build as that appeared in the Advent Calendar as well. I just like it. It's a cute little detail, and again, we're paying homage to the whole series, not just creating a realistic castle for once, which is personally the way I'd like to see them take the castle. Down on the other side of the door, we have another reference, this being Minish Link. It's one of the stumps that allows Link to transform into his Minish form. And then there's also, you'll notice, a 1x3 arch brick through the wall here, which could allow him to sneak into the castle and into one of the storerooms, which I think is a fun touch. There's also the pergola out here. This is another of the obstacles which you actually climb up and over or around in Ocarina of Time. And of course, you can place your soldiers around here and do whatever. It is a pretty tight space, but as this model is largely for display, as long as it has the, in theory, you could play with it, I'm kind of fine with that. But you could, of course, balance a minifigure all the way along the top, and that actually brings you to the slope ramp here, which takes you under the arch into Zelda's courtyard, which we'll come to in a second. Round here, and there was just a little bit of extra space, so we put a white statue. This could be a statue to anyone, but I like to imagine, and it does actually mimic the statues of Hylia that we've included in previous sets. So I like to think of it as being worshipping the goddess. And once again, there were plenty of balustrades around the outside here, specifically over the tunnel to Zelda's courtyard, where you could put more troops. Not that there's enough included in the set for that, but there were battle packs and other stuff that you could do. Now, talking about sneaking into the garden, we talked about Minish Link, and here he is printed instead of in his unprinted form. He is a micro figure, so the detail is very, very limited, and this figure actually also appeared in the Z051 Hero of the Sea Advent Calendar, and he is almost identical here, using the same very, very simple smiling expression, green torso and brown legs, and he is very tiny. No Eslo, of course, because micro figures don't have hats, but it's a cute representation, and again, just another fun one that I think fans would like to have. Guarding from Elenkimentra is, of course, the Clocktown Guard, although he is not guarding Clocktown here, he's guarding the castle, but it does ring true that this is the same figure that appeared in Clocktown and in the Echo set and in every set, because I really wanted to keep the castle guards consistent here in the Breath of the Wild styling, so that if you bought multiple sets, you could have a consistent militia and defense force, regardless of the different games having slightly different interpretations. And of course, it keeps mold costs down because it means it's only one set of printing for figures that can be reused and reused. So you'll see here in the reference image, it looks absolutely nothing like the Ocarina of Time one, instead favouring the Soldier set from Breath of the Wild, which is intentional. It is what it is. And then because we saw the mailbox, we've also got the Postman to take a look at here, and this is another reuse from Clocktown. Here's the same dual molded white legs with the boot printing, the simple torso, the plain arms, the out of breath expression, and then the printing on the, I believe it's the Imperial cap here in red, with the bunny logo, of course referencing Majora's Mask, not the Twilight Princess one. He's just scary. And yeah, he looks alright. The faces, obviously, the Majora's Mask faces are insanely weird, but it does the job. Maybe he should have a backpack, actually, but he looks fine as he is, so I'm happy with his inclusion here too. Just before then we move into the Zelda's Courtyard, let's take a look at a couple of the other Easter eggs around the side here. I mentioned that there was this sort of wall tower that comes right to the front on the very edge of the castle, and that has another little section at the top. We've placed the chests up here, of course. This is removable, and you could include anything in this chest, whether it be the rupee pack that's included, any of the weapons that come with the characters, or literally any of the other trinkets and stuff that are seen around the model here. But inside this one, you'll find a printed 2x2 tile of Ordon cheese, which is just supposed to be a nice little nod to Twilight Princess, and not finding anything useful in chests. But of course, this could appear on the dinner table in the dining room that we're going to see later, or it could just be an empty chest. You can literally do whatever with it, but I think it's important to point out. And there are actually two interiors in this small tower here below, none in the base actually, which is interesting, perhaps a waste of space there, but oh well. We've got a little storage attic here, which actually gives a gold Skulltula, which is a mold I've previously recolored for Wave 3, and a couple of pots and crates for Link to Smash. But of course, this is a gold Skulltula. It just had to be here. It's an iconic collectible. And then just beneath it, we have sort of a guard cooking room or guard outpost. Again, more so paying tribute to the cooking mechanic as a whole and Breath of the Wild, I guess, because it's reusing the same cooking pot design that we've used in sets like Bedrock Bistro and Great Sky Island. And you've got some fish hanging on the wall. It's not referencing anything specific, but I guess just the whole cooking mechanic and the fact that the guards needed like an extra place to hang out maybe, although you'll see they do have a room later. Then there's this very, very thin section of wall, which is where the arch to sort of go under to go into Zelda's Courtyard. And because it wasn't very deep, there wasn't much I could do here. So we've got two candles and an 8-bit mosaic referencing, of course, Zelda 1. I did try to make sure I had something for every Zelda game here, and you're going to have to fact check me on that. But I'm pretty sure there's something from everything in here, maybe excluding DS games. Although I did try, we'll see. You could say the post box. But yeah, this is of course 8-bit Link's face from the original Legend of Zelda. Zelda 2 is definitely referenced. And in fact, here is your 4 swords and an extra Minish Cap reference, because beneath it, we have the 4 elements that you collect to empower the 4 sword in Minish Cap. And here they are represented in stone as if they're sculpture, but we have the air element, the earth element, the grass element, I believe it is, and then the water element. And they're all sort of abstracted because there's only so much you can do to represent those details in Lego brick form, but they are indeed all here, and I think they look fantastic. I really like that it's something interesting and obscure filling out these arches, and I also like that there's 4 arches. There's just something good about the symmetry there, and it just felt like a fun one. As I said, I was trying to reference absolutely everything, so it was a nice inclusion to be able to make. So let's move into the courtyard. So again, where we were in the garden, we were right by that Hylia statue, and we sort of just peep through and peer under into this really bright and colourful space, and I really love how this looks, particularly peering through because you can actually see straight through to the window at the back, where of course you can pose Zelda on these jumper studs as if she's waiting and looking through the window for you. As I mentioned, there's plenty of flowers around. We've actually using the same trees that we used in the Tranquil Garden here, which are actually like drill bits or like castle toppers in dark green to represent 2 or 3 small shrubs, which is how it appears in the Ocarina of Time 3D. We've also got 2 pink shrubs in a pot, and then these various different yellow flowers around the edge. You also see some more flowers up above, but we'll come back to those later. There's another stickered Triforce above the window here, and this window sees clearly straight through into the reception room, which of course is the scene we see in Ocarina of Time where Ganondorf bows in between, to the King of Hyrule. Although the King of Hyrule is a different version in this set, and there is a separate throne room in this set, I think of this as more like a reception room, although we'll come back to this one in a second. But the point is, you can indeed see through the window, and that was part of the reason I had to get the depth here, because I wanted the gardens, I wanted to turn into Zelda's little room, and then I wanted you to be able to see through that window into something rather than it just be into the void, which I really appreciate. So I'm really glad for that. But of course, fans will know that there are a couple of other references in this room, specifically through the 2 windows, where you can see stickered on this glass panel here, we have a reference to Mario 64. I chose the flying cap here. I know it's just character profiles in game, but I just like this image, and I thought it was just a fun nod, so it didn't really matter. I assume they they would Legoize it and make it like a Lego Mario thing. So if they made this as a real set, which obviously they're not going to, but it is what it is. And then through the other side, if you aggravate that, I believe a castle guard drops a bomb through. So that is represented here. There's actually no glass. It is just this chute here in tan. And if we lift this section off, because yes, this particular section is actually removable. This isn't for most of the castle, just for this section. It reveals a storage room that I'll show you a closer look up later. But there's a crate of bombs and some bomb chews, and you can put them on the slope and slide them through, and then they will slide straight down into the garden where they can explode, which is a really hard to access feature, but just the kind of referential nod that I'd expect to see that makes a model like this really work and sing to me. Of course, it's worth texturing, of course, all the texturing here to get the octagonal shape, and of course you've got the water around the island, which is something that featured in the Ocarina of Time 3D version of this room. But of course what really sings here is the figures, and that is where we take a look at Child Zelda from Ocarina of Time, who's also using a 1x2 brick for her base. She's then of course got plenty printing on that and the torso, some dual molded arms in sand blue this time, or maybe they just be single molded with white molding on the tips. And a popular request, she is using the Madame Pomfrey hairpiece in white and bright yellowish orange to recreate her hairstyle, which is not a perfect match as her hairpiece is a little shorter. I looked at using the, I believe this is Jedi Luminara Unduli that has a hairpiece that's kind of similar, but I prefer this one because you can actually see the hair, and although it doesn't have the printing, we wouldn't have been able to print on the other one either, so it's a compromise. Again, compromise, it's the name of the game with these. You don't want new molds for everything, although I imagine that a character like this would probably get one. And then she just has a generic face print, probably could be an existing one, might be a specialized one, potentially could be even the same one as the Deku Tree, but that doesn't exist in this canon. But let's move on and just wrap up some bits. So I was talking about this storage room. So as I wanted to mention, this section of the castle is removable. When it removes, it reveals a door which leads into the dining room, which we'll talk about later. But inside this little section that you remove is a little shooting gallery. This is supposed to just represent how you find mini games all over the place, more so in towns than the castle, but mini games, and specifically archery mini games, are a huge part of the Zelda series. So we've got one in here. We've got this sort of medium nougat workbench here, and there is a bow sort of angled up, and you can imagine sort of angling it up and down to hit the targets, which are 3 stickers on 2x2 tiles. You notice they've been applied a little bit wonky here, naughty naughty. And then as a special target and sort of tribute to these sort of harder to hit ones from Majora's Mask, we've got a superhero poser piece here with a black bird. This was already a recolor that was featured in the Wednesday sets to represent one of those harder to hit targets, and that's sort of hidden up in the rafters, which will get you some bonus points because, of course, as everyone knows, you have to hit every single one to get the reward, which in this case is a quiver, and that quiver is on the back here behind the counter. I'm not sure who the minigame operator would be in this set. It could literally be anyone you want, but it's a fairly hard to access room and is really only sort of playable when you remove it from the model. And of course, removing it from the model gives you access to that storage room again. So I already mentioned that there's a crate full of bomb chews, so this is sort of like a soldier supply room. There's also a crate full of spears and swords. There is actually a door down here as well, although this is a faux door. It's the same medieval door that we talked about in the stable, but it actually just opens to a wall because it's right in front of the reception room, so I couldn't have a door down here, but I still wanted to give the illusion of an entrance. And then up in the rafters is our Link's Awakening nod. We've already got another one, but this is another Link's Awakening nod because there is an egg here in a nest, and of course this is just a bird egg, except for this bird egg is printed to look perhaps like a windfish egg, maybe. Another just silly reference. It's fun. But yeah, the main feature for this room was getting the bomb to come out, and I just like it. It's really hard to access, but I just think it's so cool to have stuff like that. There's of course this turret. We're now up at the Smash Bros level, but I didn't want to waste any space, so inside this little turret here on the side, the top can lift off, and inside you will find a golden bow referencing the Bow of Light from Breath of the Wild, and actually just any of the sacred duet bows, Twilight Princess, and even the Spirit Tracks. Fine, well, we use this as our Spirit Track reference when the Locomos give her sacred light arrows. And of course there's this little balcony here above this really gorgeously shaped windows. I was so pleased I could use these 3x3 curved slopes here. It's a little accentuated compared to what's there in game, but I kind of like the stylized feature and I think it works. So there's a couple of plants in that window, and then another sort of area for soldiers at the top, and this is our first sort of roof section. This is also a weapon stash area, a little bit more accessible, so 2 more bows and then 2 short swords in a crate here. Guess these can be used by anyone, but I didn't want to just leave it blank. I felt like that was a good space to do up here. And then of course we've already talked about this sloped roof, which has the removable archery game in it, which sort of finishes off this side actually, apart from Rossi returning to the inside. But before we do that, there's a couple more exterior details. Above the main entrance door, of course, we have these 2 big gates, which we'll go through in a minute, but we have these lattice windows and these sort of protruding columns. This is another design aspect I took from the models from Ocarina and then from Smash as well. I just like it. It's a bit different. It stands out. It looks quite odd, but I think it really does break up that texture and was definitely very necessary. Feels very regal. You notice a couple of other architectural details like that. And then the return of the black windows in what is actually the throne room to represent all these small windows across. We then reach our second tower, which also has a small removable compartment, although built into this one, again, this is another built-in Easter egg that you would never see, is a Final Smash orb, and that is of course just paying reference to the homage, as I said, to the reference of this building. However, that is obviously on a jumper tile, so you could keep it out of there when building, but it is designed to be locked away and just be a secret. What is not designed to be a secret is of course when you remove the top here, which reveals a storage compartment for a variety of musical instruments from across the series. These are some of the more obscure ones, and some of them actually aren't instruments. We have the Harp of Ages and the Rod of Seasons, as well as the ocarina, which would probably be the mold, but here it is brick built. The flute from Zelda 1, and then the Wind Waker baton. I did want to do the pipes from Spirit Tracks, but it just did not work. But anyway, here they all are. They all just crowd in here with a couple of other bits like the Master Sword hilt, which you'll see later. And it is just a storage container for these loose things. But I'm glad to finally be able to represent these, and gives us our oracles representation, one from each game. Wish it could be more, but those are set in different realms. So you'll notice we're a bit light on Majora's Mask referencing and the oracles and anything that was set in a different world really, because it just doesn't have a castle to go for. Behind that tower is the balcony. You'll notice a door here that we'll come back to later that leads to the throne room, but I just wanted to mention briefly that there is a stud shooter here and a crate full of bombs, and of course you can launch tiles, not the actual bombs, because they've changed the stud shooters now, so we can't shoot real bombs anymore. But yeah, it's another just little feature, it's whatever, but you can shoot weapons as if the castle was under attack. Moving up one more floor, we of course then go up to the very tall tower. There's a small representation of a Triforce using the triangular corner tiles here, and then one floor up above you've got this ledge, another one of those 3x3 rounded windows, which I also love. It's off center, which is deliberate, and I really love that. Two more flowers, and then you go straight into your dark green roof, which of course at the very top we've got the jumpers again for you to pose figures on all of these, and of course you could remove the flags from the other ones to make more figure posing points, but you've got all this space up here to chuck your Smash characters around. Okay, it's finally time to go on the inside. I've wasted enough of your time. The big doors open outwards, not very much because of the hedge bushes, but you know what it is, what it is. They're brick built doors with golden sort of flowers as the knobs, and that removes you straight into the entrance hall. We're going to take up this sort of cluster of rooms first, at least when it comes to the interior, because I want to just sort of deal with the storytelling here. So specifically, as you come into the door, you're into the entrance hall, and you're immediately greeted by a statue of Link, of course inspired by the one inside the Hyrule Castle entrance room in The Wind Waker. However, you'll also notice that the floor is incredibly raised up, and that is because we've got a feature to take a look at in just a second. But this room also doubles as sort of a reception room and a study, and just sort of a general purpose, like regal plush room. It's a bit of everything. You'll notice there's a big bookshelf at the back. It's quite a thick one that just has some variety of different maps and stuff on it. Specifically on the middle shelf, there's a 2x2 sticker that I believe is a map of Termina, although you cannot see it very well. And on the top shelf is also another Majora's Mask reference in the form of the cow boxes, which appear all throughout Clocktown and appeared in Zelda 50 Clocktown, which I really like paying homage to, and it is just a perfect little Zelda reference as well. There's a sort of cabinet over to the side here, and on top of that cabinet we've got two more references, including a map of Zelda 2, and then a rumor mill from Breath of the Wild, which is just resting here. It's rumor mill 4, which is actually the same one that we gave to Misko in set Z024. And then up on the wall is I believe it's a couple of tiles with a print or sticker of the Champions tapestry from Breath of the Wild, which foretells the calamity, and that's being held up here as art, or perhaps to remind everybody that it's coming in the future. You also notice this stable door, which is not doing a very good job at privacy, but inside the tower which stores the this is the tower that stores the instruments actually. Right in the back, very tucked away, is the castle toilet, and of course we cannot have a castle toilet without having the hand in the loo, or Farini, depending on what game you're playing. And let's take a look at that hand in the loo, which is just a minifigure attachment arm, specifically the ones used for the toads and a couple of other things. I guess this should really use the new Thing mold from Wednesday, but I kind of like this one better because of the angle it gets. And yeah, it's in tan here to represent, of course, the hand from Majora's Mask. Very similar to build to the one we actually had in Clocktown, and I just like it. It's a perfect inclusion. And while we're in the castle, we might as well take a look at another one of our Links. This is specifically Link from Link to the Past, specifically his sprite, because we all know that the game art actually does use a normal hair color, but it was the sprite that gave him pink hair, so I wanted to pay homage to that as well today. So he has a very simple bright green outfit with just a belt, dual molded lance, because he's still in his short phase. He's got the medium nougat arms, and then up is in his headpiece he's got a yelling expression, and of course that hairpiece completely recolored into pink with the yellow stripe printed on. Again, it was an outfit that I felt I had to pay homage to. Perhaps that hat shouldn't be yellow and more orange, but you know, creative liberties where must. It's yellow in all the art. So it's a fusion of the sprite and his artwork. It is what it is, really. Let's come back to the statue though, because as I said, it was inspired by Wind Waker. Of course, it had to slide out of the way to reveal a very special room. This statue is very cheapified, and I'm not a huge fan of how it looks, but it does the job. I think it's still recognizable. You've got a sword arm and a shield arm, and it had to be really shrunken because this room is not very tall, and we lost an entire brick's worth of height to this sliding mechanism. So it's definitely a lot less grand than I wanted, and it's actually using a Technic brick to sort of angle the ears on it as well. But it does the job. But anyway, these huge grates that ruin a lot of the space on the floor. The model slides to the left and the right. It's too tall to jump out, so it's fine to reveal a hole. And just like in Wind Waker, this of course lowers you down into the Master Sword pedestal room, which just had to be here. And this is the recreation of the Wind Waker one. You'll notice immediately the murals in the back, which of course are 3 stickers on some glass panes. The one of Ganondorf stealing the Triforce and the lands preparing to flood. And then 2 sages, specifically the 2 that aren't tied to a specific like regional race. So we chose Impa and Rauru over the ones that actually have like race representation. I just thought they worked color-wise, so I was pleased with that. And I know Impa's a Sheikah, but you get my point. There's also 2 figure statues down here who are very, very simple because again, they couldn't even have helmets because they'd just be too tall. And that is to represent sort of the knight statues that hold their swords over the sword pedestal, and they are doing that here as well. On the sword pedestal, you have 2 display modes. You have a 3x3 tile with a Triforce logo printed on it with the 3 aspects, including Nehru, Din, and of course Feyor on them. And then if you take that off, that reveals a jumper plate of which you can stick in this build for the Master Sword hilt as if the sword is still in the pedestal. And there's also these 2 flamey torches down here. And again, you've got to appreciate this is a very small space. This space is only 3 or 4 studs tall, which is not enough to work with to do a proper detailed interior. So I'm actually really proud of how this turned out, and I absolutely love the stickers on the back wall. I think that works incredibly well, and I love the fact that I was still able to get the sliding feature in as well. It's not the only sliding feature we have in this set, but I'm just really pleased that it worked out. While we're down in the basement, let's take a quick look at these other diorama rooms with a very small 6 wide one, which just has a decayed Guardian, of course, paying homage to Breath of the Wild. In fact, this whole corner does, because then we have a mining operation similar to the one we see in the Breath of the Wild library. They've uncovered a diamond, rare mineral from Breath of the Wild, and there's a pickaxe here, because they seem to have hit the observatory wall. And when we have the teeniest, tiniest version of the Sheikah Observatory underneath the castle, with the markings on the floor with the sort of Sheikah eye, again, very, 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 very tiny. And then of course just some stickers on some curved panels to recreate these sort of star patterns. There's no hole above, there's no nothing, and a Calamity Ganon, which is included in the set, does not fit. You'd have to fight him out in the field or just pretend that he's in the room. But I still wanted to include it. It's a part of the castle, it's in the basement, it made a lot of sense to me, so it is down here. Let's take a look at Calamity Ganon. This is the same build that appeared in Z024, the Hyrule Castle Sanctum, and I can announce that I'll actually be having him in real life very, very soon. So I've got to get to work on those head stickers, it seems, because he's coming. It's coming. I've got almost all the parts for him coming because he's finally viable real life. But yeah, he's a brick build character. He has lots of flexible legs that are on ball joints and various different weapons using lots of transparent elements and so on. His head is printed on one of the new details and then on a brick, so it goes around a curve, meaning that there would be a gap, but it would be printed. And then he's got, of course, his big menacing beard, making use of a load of dark red teeth and slope elements, and then his abdomen out the back angled upwards as well. So nice solid build. There's no real good reference images of Calamity Ganon, so you're just going to take my word for it, but the weapons are in the correct spaces and I think he looks cool enough. So yeah, let's move on. Just above good old Clamgan's room is the stable that I mentioned, got to be what, over 15 minutes ago now. This is a fairly simple build because it needed to be large enough to hold the horse in the set, which you'll see in a minute. You also notice the blue chicken, that is the stand-in for Korijo, who would be hanging out in this room. Just around the corner there's like a hay pail, which just like loosely stacked up against the wall, making use of a lot more of the thatchy elements like we see in the new medieval sets. There's a crate in back which has some Lon Lon milk, again a print we've seen before, and a sticker on that panel which shows that the milk has also been sort of like stashed up on the shelves, which is a bit weird I guess for a horse enclosure, and I'm sure they'd get knocked down, but it's an extra detail, and I always like to put stuff in these panels because they do in official sets and it really does add a spot to the model, even though it's a little bit unrealistic I guess. And then of course the main feature here is you've got a stable or stall for the horse, just made up of fence elements and a gate elements on a hook. But that of course means that you could open it up and it would swing out the way and give you a spot to reveal for your horse just to sort of trot in. But again, it's all very tight spaces, although it's intended for play, it's really not very accessible. So of course to put in here we have Zelda's horse, who is just a normal horse piece with a lavender saddle. Pretty sure that's coming in a friend set before. Again, simplifying, I'm not doing any barding, I refuse. And then it has a golden mane, of course, paying more attention there to the Breath of the Wild version of the horse rather than the ocarina one. But I like it as a contrast piece, so it's whatever. It's a very simple horse and it's an inclusion that doesn't really matter. Okay, let me draw your attention back to the main entrance hall, you can see the Link statue here over on the left. Up on the wall there is a sticker of Daphne's No Hands in Hyrule from the Wind Waker version. And the reason I've drawn your attention here is because we actually have one more sort of section of the ground floor to take a look at. And this is over on the back section, which is the reception room. I told you we'd come back to here right behind Zelda's room. I know it's very hard to flow through this in a logical way that makes sense, so you'll have to forgive me. This room is actually quite open and actually sits above a small another basement diorama, which we'll take a look at first. This is, of course, a fairy fountain. And I told you we had a fairy in a set for a reason. You'll notice down here, of course, we've got the sort of Triforce symbol, which again is a sticker on a 2x2 tile to where you play Zelda's Lullaby. And then if you look, you've got the columns around the back, and then I'm using the technique of sticking bars through headlight bricks to create sort of stars or a speckly, like shimmery pattern in the background. Maybe it's fairy dust or whatever. And for the scale, I'm actually pretty pleased with how this one came out. I think it's recognizable. There's plenty of space to pose the fairy inside the fountain, which of course has some water in the bottom. But then I've also got these rounded elements, and I actually really like the use of the flowers for sort of some decoration to the pond. So for a really simple thing, I think it works quite well and effectively, and there's quite a lot of space, even though it's like barely tall enough to fit a figure in, because this one's actually only like 3.5 studs tall, which is even less than the rest of it. But moving up to the reception room, again, plenty more sticker details up here. We've got a red carpet running down the center up to a throne, but it's not really like a major throne. It's more of, again, just like a reception room seating. So still raised up on a platform and space for the king to sit, who we'll see later. There's a sort of some more royal pictures on the walls. One of them is not relevant. We have the Mayor Tour and Madame Aroma picture from from Majora's Mask, which I guess is paying reference to distant cousins or whatever. But again, people in the family. And then this rounded one here, which features the princess with the crew from Wind Waker, which is actually a photo that is seen in the sunken Hyrule in Wind Waker to show what their life was like before and how her crew were sort of her advisors, I guess. So that is referenced out here, and of course that would all be Lego-ified in the real version as well. Then there's a 2x3 tile with a Hyrule pendant, and then there's a small little desk under the window, including our first of a couple of references to Silent Princesses here, being the Silent Princess that is in this flower. And then on the table we have Zelda's letter. Not a letter to smash, I did consider it, but it is the Zelda letter item that you get in Ocarina of Time that allows you access to the Death Mountain Trail and Zora's Domain. We're talking about the fairy fountain, so let's meet our great fairy. And here she is, and this was an interesting one to translate because she definitely had to be toned down. The N64 was a wild time. She's got a face print, and then she's actually using the long hair piece that I don't remember who it came for, but it's really long down the back, so it doesn't recreate the braids, but it does get sort of the top knot part right. She should have some vines on her face, but as I said, I've toned down the design somewhat. She's got plain arms, she's got her little sash around her arm, or like a waist I should say, and then the sort of dress printing does extend onto her thighs. The reason you can't see it in this image very well is because the legs are in a position where the printing is obscured by the rest of the model, but it is there. And then she's got her feet as well. So I like this figure. I'm pretty pleased with how this one turned out, even though it's not the most accurate. Once again, not a great Lego color for that shade of pink either, but yeah, I like her. She was a long overdue inclusion, and I'm pleased she's here. But let's move back to the model now. We've got to go up one more floor to the dining room, which sits above the reception room. This is where that door to the minigame room lies. It doesn't open all the way because of the chairs, but it opens enough that you could squeeze a figure inside. But once again, I'll say you just take the room out for the minigame room. It just is easier. On the wall here, we have another sticker representing Link on the wall. I guess he's spying on the royal family dining. And you'll notice that on the wall behind the table, there is a clock town clock to keep time, and of course, just pay homage to that. There are two fairly fancy chairs at either side, and then other minifigures down the length can stand on these two jumper plates. There's a candelabra on the table, there's a roast chicken, and there's an apple, and of course, as I mentioned, you could bring up the Ordon cheese, or dare I say the windfish egg, and eat all kinds of things that are included in this set, or the fish. There's plenty of meals to put on the table, but this is just set up like a royal banquet, and this room, of course, is a general castle feature, but pays tribute to the Breath of the Wild castle. Now that we're on the second floor, we can move back into the main castle to where we have the prison, or should I say lockup. This is mostly inspired by Link to the Past. It has a jail cell that can slide open and closed on this railing here. You can see it moving backwards and forwards, and on the inside are some very simple redding beds. You can't see it in this render, but there is a second one in this corner, I promise you, alongside a candle, but it's just too dark in there. There's also a little table here with a candle on the outside, and on the wall we have a stickered portrait referencing Echoes of Wisdom, where it is the Zelda Wanted photo with that awfully drawn version of her, and at the top I believe it says Zelda or Wanted in Hylian. I cannot remember what I actually translated in the end, but it is there. And then you can see that she is actually worth 1,000 rupees, so good on her. She's got a good sort of bounty on her head. There's actually this really small room next up on the middle here, which is actually the Poe Soul Collector's room from Ocarina of Time, which is a room that does feature in Castle Town, just not in the castle itself. Don't know why I felt compelled to include it here, but it did feel like a right addition. At the very back in the shadows, you can see there's a cage element with bars, and behind that, on a sort of transparent piece, is these 2 stickers on 1x2 tiles of the Poe souls that are floating in there, and those are just connected to other pieces to allow them to sort of be snottily connected. And those are behind the bars in his cage. He's got a little jumper plate in the front for him to sit on or stand on. He doesn't really actually, he's not actually able to sit down. There's a pot in here as well as a couple of details on the wall. On the right hand side, we have a Tingle Wanted photo, and unfortunately he is not worth very much, only worth 20 rupees. And then on the other side is a 1x2 tile with a Yiga eye on it, and I see this as a recruitment poster or an idea that they're watching, but again, just paying homage to this other sort of dark faction, and of course their connection with Poe's being the other faction that explores the depths. And the Poe Collector, of course, being here. So it just felt thematically appropriate. And as I said, I'm blending from across the franchise, so that is why that is here in the middle. But it is a pretty small room. Let's take a look at its occupant, the Poe Collector. The Poe Collector is actually using the same over-the-head mold that we developed for the Wiz Robes back in Wave 4. It's just, of course, recolored and has different printing on it. And this slots over a normal minifigure body and legs, which the legs here are dual molded. He's holding a 3x3 bar, and he has that creepy hood. Again, it's not perfect, but I'd rather use an existing mold I've made than come up with a brand new mold. And to be fair, I could have used the Sith hood that they introduced in 2019. I say Sith hood as if its first appearance wasn't on Obi-Wan Kenobi, but the newer hood design probably could have worked quite well for him, and they're just giving him purple arms. But I like this as an option. It's a bit more shapely, and it makes use of an existing Zelda mold that we came up with. So it's whatever. But with his room done, it moves to our last room on the second floor, which happens to be Zelda's bedroom here. And there's a load in here, absolutely load of references. Firstly, of course, we have the bed, which is just, again, a comfy bed, but it also pays tribute to Echoes of Wisdom because it's the level 3 bed from that game and actually just appeared in the Echoes of Wisdom Hyrule Castle. I stole the build from here. It is on a red rug, and down the very side between the bed and this screen here is actually a book, which of course references her diary, which you can find in her room in the Breath of the Wild castle. This screen here is another Breath of the Wild nod because these are these screens that would be like a dressing screen is in her room in that castle as well as in a couple of other places. I just liked it as a piece of architecture, so I decided to recreate it here, and it has a whopping 6 stickers, 2 on each panel, and there's 3 panels, so 6 in total. And I like that it divides the room from this sort of vanity here, which has a red chair and then a mirror, and again using that Monkey Kid cloud piece, I'm particularly fond of that. I think that looks really cool. And then there's a little desk with 2 studs here. You could put something on it. But what interests me most about this room is, of course, the wall decorations. Behind the bed, we have this great little sticker here, which of course has the tri-rod in its frame. That was a last-minute addition once I finished Echoes. And then you'll see a bookshelf where she has her plushie of Tingle, which comes from Skyward Sword. The Lothbrok carving that Link makes her in that game, which is so cute, I had to include it. And then 3 books, which you'll notice are green, red, and blue, referencing, of course, the 3 golden goddesses, but also the 3 fan Zelda books, being Hyrule Historia, and then the other 2 as well that I'm forgetting the name of. I know, it's scandalous, isn't it? And then on the wall as well, we also have a map of Breath of the Wild Hyrule. We have a picture of, I guess it's kind of supposed to be a sketch of her mother, but it's actually her design in the Age of Calamity loading screen. I kind of like that as an abstract sketch, but like, yeah, either she's sketching and drawing, or it's just supposed to be a portrait of her mother done artistically. And then on the other wall, she has a photo of a long-distant cousin, that being King Harkonnen from the CDIs, I believe. Of course, inhabiting this room, we have our next Zelda, which is the adult Zelda from Ocarina of Time to go with her child counterpart. This is a figure we've seen before in the Temple of Time. She's got the long wavy hair, which is somewhat accurate, but again, not perfect. Ocarina of Time 3D did weird things with the hair. I'm still sticking with medium nougat. I don't know why. I just am. Look, okay, just let me have this one. She has the dual molded arms with pearl gold at the top and then lavender at the bottom, and then a dress piece with all the correct printing on it. There's actually a great purist piece for this now. It doesn't have the tabard, but it's pretty good in the meantime, so I've got to pick that up soon. And then magenta for her robes, which again, Ocarina of Time 3D did weird things with color. Just trust me on the fact that it looks like the renders or whatever. Then also directly above the room, as it would be in-game, but also to pay homage to Breath of the Wild and just use space in the tower, we have Zelda Study, which is split into 2 floors. Of course, you could fit a guard up on the top, but we have the main study floor, which has a desk with a silent princess, a inkwell for all of her studying, and then a stack of papers, all of which have various different stickers. We've got one of Terraco, we've got one of the Guardian, and then one of an ancient spring and screw, all stacked up for a very, very small space. It was the best I can do. We'll see a much better version of this when I get to do her tower in the Breath of the Wild Hyrule Castle big project, but it's huge, so that's going to take a while. There's also a spear down here, and then there's this small little loft space, which isn't huge, but it does hold another little reference. We've got all these crates in the way, and you can see this is storage space or whatever, but when you remove this barrel, you'll see at the back there is this shape here, and this is of course the part we used for Terraco. So it is a nod to a sort of in-storage Terraco up in the boxes in the loft above the storage containers, which is probably a nod they would never make because, well, it's a reference to a game that isn't considered canon, but it is here and it is a lovely little nod. And I really like that. And I think it's something that could so simply be included in a model if we got something like this. And I hope that they do pay homage to just everything possible. And I really think that's why a tribute castle is the way to go, because it just opens up so many more options for fun things like that. But back down on that, we saw this door earlier on this balcony, and that leads you into the throne room, which is kind of the only other room on this level. We're getting up to the sort of the very top now. And this one is, of course, inspired by Link to the Past. We've got the blue curtains on the side, the pink and red walkway up to the center throne, which is tan. You've got two thrones for people to sit on, the king, perhaps Aghanim, or perhaps someone that's already dead. And then behind it, you've got this panel piece, which has a sticker of the two swords crossed, which is actually what marks the hidden entrance in Link to the Past, which, don't worry, I'm coming back to. I said there was another sliding feature. Off to the right, just to fill space, we have another dome, which has a silent princess in, marking this the third one in this set, one for each goddess, I guess. And then you'll notice that there's lots of jumper studs on this floor, and this is just so that you could pose up a scene. You can have Link and Zelda come to confront the king, or perhaps come to pledge fealty, and you've got one in the corner for scheming little Aghanim to stand in. And of course, it's right above the lockup, meaning you can slide the thrones out of the way, and that creates a drop down straight into the cell. Now I realize it shouldn't drop into the cell, but it was just the only way to make this work. And I kind of like the idea of it sliding out the way and you dropping someone into prison, perhaps when Aghanim does a takeover. But another sliding feature, another bit of cohesion between these rooms, which I really appreciate. But let's keep moving and meet the inhabitants here. Of course, we have the king from Link to the Past, who is very, very basic. He has some gold cuff printing on his arms, a plain torso, and then just some simple painting on his legs just to create the boots. He's using the classic crown piece that was introduced with series, I want to say 13 of the collectible minifigures, and then just the normal beard or long beard, and then just a very simple face, because this is all I have to work off. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? He sits down, he's a very, very small sprite, you know, like, what was I supposed to do? I like it. It's green, it's different from all the other kings, and he's exclusive to this set. A figure I'm much more keen on though is Aghanim, sort of the main antagonist, I guess, from Link to the Past, and he is of course here in his concept art form rather than his sprite form, which allowed me to give him sand blue as the colour. You could argue lavender, you could argue white, but I liked sand blue as a contrast to the red. Here he is using the Sith hood that we talked about earlier. Questionably, I guess he should have had a new one, but I like it as it is, and then the robes are all printed. No cape, because it just would clash, but yeah, we've got the robes printed down straight through the dress piece, and I like how spooky he looks. He's one of my favourite figures in this set, and he's got his little bandana here because you can't put like a scarf piece and the hood piece on him at the same time. So that would be an argument for using a different hood piece, is so that I could use the Ninjago or City scarf actually on backwards to recreate that wrap around there. But I'm happy with him. I like how he turned out, and I think he looks suitably evil. Let's move up then into the tower. There are 3 rooms up here, well 2 you can call real rooms, and then one that's just sort of a facade, I guess. Let's start down here, and you'll notice it's empty, just 2 studs on the floor, and that is because you've actually got 2 different display options here. You may have seen this, well, ages ago when we were talking about the bag breakdown, but the first thing you can put in here is this crystal, which is designed for you to fit the princess in. Now, she would not fit in here whole, because this is the same mold they used for the Disney princess dresses, where you were able to store the upper half of the princess inside the dress, and that was kind of always a tight fit. But I do think that if you took her apart, she would probably fit, or most of her would fit, or at least like enough of her would fit that it would be believable and worth having. So you can store that crystal up here just in the same way they stored the Master mold in that Chaos Shrine set, and this is here in Sparkly Pink, which is the colour it already exists in, and that can be stored up here as if Ganondorf has imprisoned her away. Or my preferred option is this picture frame here, which of course is referencing Link Between Worlds and Yuga, where you can of course have this picture frame with all these elements here, which actually do have really subtle Triforce prints on the corners as well, which of course is accurate, and then you put Zelda as a figure who can stand right behind it, and it looks like she's trapped in a painting. I love this. This is fun. I like this. They did something similar with the portrait feature from the Luigi's Mansion sets, but I like this one much better. I just think this is cool. And of course they're removable, they're interchangeable. You could put anything up here you wanted, but I like the idea of it being a picture frame. It's a nice use of the space. It does technically mean that Zelda's picture doesn't come in the same style, but that just came in the fan choice CMF, which I know is not canon, but you're just going to have to wait for another appearance of the 2x3 tile of her actually in her artwork form, or Link Between Worlds Zelda, because she does not come in this set. However, all of the other sages do, because the room up above is the transition to Lorule. Once again, this room has 2 sort of forms. One in which you can imagine Yuga is doing the ritual and has made this circle of the portraits to summon Ganon, which you can see here. She's got all 7 sages, but you can always remove these as well, and they open up as well. So you can close them in for compact, or you can open them out, and we've got Ceres and Impa and Gully, and then the Queen Zora and Rocco and Sasrashla, and then Irene as well. And yeah, you can remove these easily. They're on jumpers, and that reveals a big sort of banner. And I think you know where this is going. If we lift the banner up out of the way, you can see a portal to the Dark World, or should I say Lorule as well. And that is of course a sticker on this 2x6 tile. That was a feature I knew I wanted in here from day one. It's something that appears at the top of the tower. I knew it was a great inclusion to get Yuga in here and also the sages in here, and it just felt so right. It felt so perfect. It's a little hidden detail. Let's talk about Yuga then, who is here for the first time, and I'm very, very excited to finally have him here. He's got some wonderful leg printing, no arm printing, but some simple torso printing as well. A plain white head with that clown makeup, which I actually think translated really well into Lego form. And we're using dark orange as the hair color, which again doesn't quite look like this image here, but does work quite well to the in-game model. And this is I believe it's the Mordo hair, or was it one of the ones that was developed for the Avatar line? Either way, it is here and looks great. I think it's Mordo's hair from the Sanctum Sanctorum. He also has a cape, of course, stylish. Purple on the outside, dark red on the inside, and then a 3-long bar with the BB9E head, and then a flame in trans yellow coming out of the top to recreate the sort of paint splatter swirls, and then that smirk on the face. This is my favorite figure in the set. I love this one a lot, and it's exclusive for now as well. And then up to the very, very top, inside the green roof, another thing that absolutely had to be here, and especially at the top, is Ganon's organ. There is just enough space to sit a Ganon in here, but the organ itself is actually built into the roof. It cannot be removed. 2 of the pipes have been shrunken down and actually are attached to the green studs, and then the other ones are just made with candlestick pieces and then the traditional piano techniques. It's very small. It's not impressive enough for sure. It needs its own set really, but I really am pleased I was able to squeeze it in here. And then of course, that is the end of that room, which means we have to meet Ganondorf, who is another one of our villains included in the set, and of course that piano is his. The real standout feature here is, of course, he uses the Doctor Strange rubber cape in dark red to represent that flowy cape that he has in his boss battle. And I love this film. I really hope the official figure uses this, because, like, whenever they do one, because if they do one, but when, because it's just so perfect. And I do think dark red is the right choice for it. I just really love how it looks on him. It adds such a presence, even though he doesn't really have a neckline. I guess he has the armor line, but I just really like it. I mean, they're probably not going to, but I just love the presence it gives him. He's printed all over. This figure's been seen before in the Temple of Time, but he's got dual-mounted arms with printing, olive green hands, printing on the torso, on the hip, on the legs, and then of course that big evil smirk, and then the grip hook hairpiece to represent that receding hairline with elf ears in olive green and red. But another great figure, one I loved from the Temple of Time set, and is deserving of a spot here, but Yuga is definitely my favourite new addition. That is every interior room, so that finishes up our major look at the castle, but we're not quite done yet, because we do have one more figure to take a look at, and that is Triforce Wishlink, who, as I didn't really mention properly at the beginning, is the special non-canon figure that is being included because this is an anniversary set. Now, if this set was released, I would not expect to see something like this. In its canon form in the CSS, the Tribute Castle does not feature Triforce Wishlink. This is purely here because, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are celebrating 5 years of doing these models, and I thank every one of you that is still here at this point in the video, because they are long and I know I put a lot into it, but I hope it's worth it. And this is our tribute for 5 years and 100 sets. This is Triforce Wishlink, who is a pearl gold figure on his torso and his legs. He features a printed Triforce like we've done before, and then he has a transparent blue arm with printing to represent the power of Nehru, a transparent red arm with the printing of Din's symbol to represent the power of Din, and then a, I don't know, opaque or partially translucent green and a gold molded hat piece with the hat in green to represent the power of courage and Feyor. His eyes are green, glowing with that traditional courage, and again for Feyor. His eyebrows are gold, his hair is gold, which is obviously for celebration, but also of course to reference the official link in 77092, the Great Deku Tree. And then on the printing, you'll notice that the power of the Triforce is running up his body in the form of this tessellating triangle pattern, which I love how that looks, especially because it would be in that slightly shimmery gold if it was real as well. And then of course he's got the belt on there, which of course is just his belt, but I can't help but think of the Something About Zelda video where that she has where the goddess Hylia sends him to correct 3 magic belt buckles. It just also reminds me of that because the goddess symbols are on it. But mostly, of course, it is just his belt, and you can see the insignias because he's collected these spheres of Nehru, Din, and Feyor. So I really love this figure. It's unconventional for an anniversary figure, but I do love how it looks, and I specifically like there's a little bit of translucence, there's a little bit of raw power going for him, because this is what happens when you wish on the Triforce, right? Which is thematically appropriate because this whole project is a wish. Anyone that's still watching, if you want to go translate the Hylian on the puzzle that we did, you'll see what I mean. So just before we wrap up, of course, here it is with all the other D2C sets: Lookout Landing, Clock Tower, the Hylian Shield, Temple of Time, Champions Art, Botanical Collection, Goomba's Cave, and Master Koga. And you'll notice there's a big blank because there is one more, 090, that we have not covered yet. I realise we're celebrating 105 years, but it is the 100th set I have designed. I've designed all 1 to 100. but I haven't released them all. So technically for you guys, this isn't the 100th, but it's the 100th for me, so it's still just as impactful. And of course, it's celebrating 5 years more than anything as well. And here we are on the grid so far. You can see the castle now is down at the very, very bottom. And these are the gaps still to go in the first 100. Again, all of these are designed. Some of them you've seen, actually. I forgot to fill in the smoothie stand gap from a couple of weeks ago. So that's a whoops on my part. But we've still got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sets to go. Some of those will dupe together, but still plenty more to see. And of course, I'm still designing as well. That's the text I was talking about translating, by the way. And just as a reminder, of course, send your builds art and other creations to octane.thermoplastic@gmail.com for a chance to be featured in that upcoming video. And I hope you guys enjoyed. But let's just wrap things up now. But that does us for today on Z0100, the Hyrule Castle's Collector's Edition, otherwise known as the Tribute Castle, that pays attention to Ocarina of Time on the outside, pays homage to the CSS, and gives us potentially a look at what I think could be one of the strongest real-life LEGO Zelda sets. Obviously not in this form. I never mean for them to take exactly what I do and translate it, but if a designer attempted the same concept, they'd come up with something completely different, better, but hitting on those same notes, and it's those notes that I think important. Celebrating franchise history, bringing it all together in a model, and paying reference to the obscure stuff. This is going to be a little difficult, but let's just see. I'm going to probably miss a game, but we had a reference to Zelda 1 in the form of the 8-bit Link and a couple of other things. We had Zelda 2 in the form of the map. The older ones were the hardest. Link's Awakening through the 8-bit, not the 8-bit, the 2D segment, but also the Windfish Egg. Then we had Link to the Past through the Throne Room, and a lot of the figures here are Link to the Past as well. Then Ocarina of Time is just everywhere in this castle, in the exterior, in the figures, in the horse, in the stables, in, of course, Zelda's courtyard and stuff like that. Majora's Mask has some maps. The mail institution, I guess, and the cacao mailbox. We've got stuff from the oracles. We've got stuff from Minish. We have a little bit of Four Swords, although it's kind of dubious. We have Wind Waker in spades, really. We have Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks on the edge. They're here. They're just very, very lightly represented. I should have done a better job. I feel the DS games get too short a stick. And then, yeah, Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess gets some as well. Like, there's a little bit of everything in here, which is the way it should be. It's the way it should be. And, yeah, that is all I have for you. Let me know what you thought of this one. Again, I hope you've enjoyed the last 5 years, and I look forward to seeing you guys' submissions in a month's time. Let me know everything about this one. Go on, now's the time. Leave a big comment. Do it. You know you want to. We've earned it, right? And I will see you again very, very soon. Take care now, and plenty more to come. Bye-bye.